Hi, and welcome to the Home Assistant running on Synology in Docker. Today we're going to install Facebox, face recognition software. We'll start in 10 seconds. Goal for today is to install Facebox and to connect it with the motionEye. Unfortunately, I spent about 2 weeks of my time trying to work out the simplest way how to do it, because I don't even like my own home setup, but I ran into a couple of problems. For face recognition, or if you for example would go with the object recognition or license plate recognition, you need a couple of things in your setup. First thing, of course, is camera. Then you have to have some kind of recording software for the camera. We'll be using motionEye for this one, but you could also use surveillance station. Next thing, what you need is, of course, some kind of software for object or face recognition. We will be using Machinebox software called Facebox. The process looks like this. The camera receives motion, it detects motion, and after it detects the motion, it has to do two things. First of all, it has to provide image of that motion or that object or face. And second, it has to trigger some kind of event. Home Assistant has great component, and this component is called push. What push does is it allows our recording software, in this case motionEye, to send not just notification, but also using the webhook to send also the image. If this would work, this would be the easiest way to kill the two flies with one stroke. But unfortunately, I did encounter couple of errors. I tried changing cameras, I tried changing various setup options. No matter where I went, I received error. If you want to read more about that error, I'll post a link to my community post that I made. I also tried asking on Discord, but unfortunately I didn't receive any response on that. To overcome that, we will unfortunately have to overcomplicate our system a bit. It is still less complicated than my own home setup, because I use additional piece of software in between the motionEye and Home Assistant, and that Node-RED. And that is due to the fact that Surveillance Station had problem or bug in its software, where Surveillance Station was unable to call webhook with post command, and it used get command. On the other hand, Home Assistant didn't allow get command, it only worked with post command, so I had to put Node-RED in between to translate between the get and the post command. I don't like that setup, and I definitely will be still working on this in future. I hope that I will be able to resolve this issue. I will try on 2 additional systems, because definitely the easiest way would be to go with the push. But as I said, it doesn't work. What we are left with is a little bit more complicated than I would like it to be, but we will be using a workaround. Our workaround or our setup, and I really do need to explain it before we continue with the installation, will be following. motionEye will capture only one single image when it receives motion detection notification. It will save this image inside Home Assistant folder. We will create a new folder for that. But we will also have to change our Docker command for the motionEye. And after it saves, or during the period when it's saving the image, it will also trigger or initiate call to webhook on Home Assistant. It will allow us to receive the image inside Home Assistant, to be able to use camera file integration inside Home Assistant for the image, and also trigger will be used to trigger our Facebox to do face recognition. First thing that we have to do now is we have to go to Facebox website, and we have to get Machinebox key. A key, this is same as a API key, will allow us to use free version of Facebox. Free version is limited in the quantity of images it uses or quantity of faces it can detect. I think that limit is 100 images used to learn a face. On my setup, I think I'm using about 20 images for 4 faces, so it's 5 images per face, but we'll talk a little bit about that when we come to that. So let's apply for the free key. We have to go to account page, and since Machinebox was bought by VERITONE, we have to agree on Machinebox terms and conditions, and we have to create new VERITONE account. Let's type in here our email address, box@beardedthinker.com. I hope I'm not a robot. And let's create account. And I agree. Let's check email. And when you click on the link in the email, you will be directed to the web page where you have typed in your new password. Let's go to login. There are a couple of things that you have to tell about yourself in the first page. It should be easy. Let's log in. And when you finish setting up your profile, you will eventually end up on screen like this. Now we have to go to the Machinebox and reveal our key so we can copy it and use it inside our setup. Let's copy this, and that's it. We can now start setting up the Docker container with the Facebox. Let's open up our terminal application. Let's connect to the server. Setting up of the Facebox is a bit different. We will not be using permanent folders, but we have to define environment variable. This is the key that we copied just seconds ago from the website. So what we have to do is we have to copy it here inside our terminal. Let's paste this. Okay. And next step is to download the image and install it. This command will be a bit shorter than normal. So this is sudo super user do docker run. Now we will define that we want to run it in the detached mode. So it's itd. Next thing will be giving it a name. Let's call it Facebox. We want this application to restart on error or always. Network will be used host network. We will define port here, and yes, I know that ports are not used in host mode, but when we type, we will also remember that we will be using port 8080. We need to define that we want to use key we previously posted here as key inside the Docker image or Docker container. So this will be environment variable mb key equals $mb key. Next thing what we'll do is we will define address of our Facebox address. This will be our Synology address, equals 192.168.1.201 for me. And last thing what we want to do is we want to specify what image we want to download. For Synology, you have to use this image. If you are using a normal PC, especially the PC that has better CPU and graphic cards, you would use different image. But for Synology, it's mandatory that you use following: Machinebox, Facebox, no AVX. What this does is it tells the Docker container that we do not have AVX support in our processor, so it will not try to use that one. If, for example, you would run it without this, it would fail. And this should be it. Hopefully we typed everything correct. Let's run this. Finally, our image is downloaded, installed, and up and running. Let's go inside Portainer. Let's check if everything is installed okay. Containers, and Facebox is up and running. We can now visit the URL for the Facebox. It is running on port 8080. Let's visit that page. And when you open up the URL for the Facebox, you will be greeted with the following page. We will be coming back to this one. We still have to teach our box to know what faces we will be using, but this is the main interface of the Facebox. This part is done. Next part is to change our setup for the motionEye. For that we will go once again back to Portainer. Inside Portainer we will go to Containers, motionEye. We will stop it. And after it is stopped, we will remove it. Okay, remove. Let's go back to PuTTY. Let's clear this. As I said, in order for us to analyze images, we have to get those images back to our system. As we will be using Home Assistant to run and trigger Facebox, we want to save those images inside our Home Assistant folder. Let's make a new folder. Make directory volume 1 Docker Home Assistant. This is our Home Assistant configuration folder, and inside that configuration folder we will create a new subfolder called recordings. Okay, let's verify everything. Let's go to our Home Assistant folder. Home Assistant. And let's see what we have here. As you can see, here is our recordings folder. But at this point we do not have motionEye anymore. For that we'll be using a command we used before, a little bit changed. Let me just copy what we used before. And as you can see here, we have standard command we used to create motionEye. So it was sudo docker run terminal detached restart always. We gave it name, we defined network, we defined port, we defined where we keep our local time, and then we connected a couple of folders. One of them was our recordings folder. Let's go back here. Let's delete this, and let's just type here Home Assistant. Let's press enter, type in our password, and that's it. We didn't download image because image was already on our Synology. We just created new container using new variables. Let's check it. If you go to your motionEye IP address, and this is normally IP address of your Synology with the port 8765, you should be greeted with the login page. Let's log in. And here you can see picture from the camera early in the morning. Let's go to settings page. What we need to do now is we have to configure our camera to do a couple of things. First thing what we need to do is we have to go to file storage, and you have to check that you are using following URL. By default it should be something like camera1, but we want to remove this camera1 subfolder because we want to save all images if you, for example, have 2, 3, 4 cameras inside the main folder. Make sure you have something like this. Text overlay, you can still leave anything you had before. Video streaming, it's all up to you. You can change default settings for the streaming, this doesn't matter at this point. In still images, you have to give here name. This should be some variable. Here is a list. If you move your mouse over this question mark, you will see what variables are available, but we will not be using it. We want to have permanent name for this image, and let's call this cam1 face. Depending on the resolution of your camera, you may want to leave this at 100% or reduce it. For the test purposes, I'm using my old camera and it's not that good quality, so I'll leave this at 100%. For capture mode, we want to make sure we have one picture only. This is necessary because, first of all, we do not want to overload the system, and second, we want to leave original picture that triggered something to be the one that we are analyzing. Depending on your storage, you can leave or play with this, but remember that we are now using only one image file name, and each new image will be overwriting the previous one, so really doesn't matter. For this setup, we are not interested in movies. You can play with it, you can change it, but yes, we are not using it. And in motion detection, you have to customize those settings depending on your setup. So change whatever you want to change here depending on your setup. And last and very important thing we want to change here is motion notifications. As you can see, I already set this up. In a perfect world, what you would do is you would use this command. And this would call a command that would be using post, and it will be posting on following URL and webhook from the Home Assistant, also the image that we received from our camera. But unfortunately, in my setup on 2 different cameras, I was unable to use this command. Second best option is, of course, to use webhook URL. And what you have to do is you have to type in HTTP, your Synology IP address with the port, /API/webhook, and then you have to give it a name depending on what you want to call it. So let's call this cam1 motion. This is very important because we will be using this webhook URL to trigger something in Home Assistant, and our automation will be based on the name of this webhook. We are done here. As I said earlier, I will be posting all the URLs also in the description of the video. Let's click apply. And everything should be set up now inside the motionEye. Next thing, and unfortunately not the last thing, what we have to do is we have to customize, of course, Home Assistant. Let's go back to Home Assistant. In Home Assistant, we will create a new camera, and this camera will be using a locally saved picture inside the Home Assistant recordings folder. Let's go to Configurator. And in configurator, let's find our cameras. Okay, so this is camera. As I said, we want to define a new camera and we will be using local file as platform. What this does, it allows us to use local entity, or in this case local picture, to create a camera image. So this will be platform local file. Next thing what we need to do here is we need to give it a name. We will be naming it, let's call it cam1 image. And the last part we have to define for this local file camera is of course path to our camera file. So this will be file path, and there are a couple of options on how you can define it. Just for the test purpose, I will give you both options. First option is full path, so this should be something like config recordings, and here we have to give the name of the file we defined previously, so it will be cam1 face.jpg. This is one way you can define it. Second option is to define it in I think it's called relative path. I'm not sure, I haven't played with that for years and ages, since the DOS times. So let's try that one. For that I will create a new camera, platform local file, name will be cam1 alt, so alternative, and let's try the second path. So it's file path equals recordings cam1 face jpeg. You don't have to do it both ways, you can choose one way or the other. I just wanted to show you that there are options on how you can do it. And what this will create, it will create two individual cameras, one called cam1 image and the other one will be called cam1 alt, and they will both show the same picture. Let us save this. Let's go to configuration, server control, check configuration, and let's restart our server. And the server is back online. To verify that everything is working correctly, there are two options of course, as always, or more, but we will use the simple one. So let's go to overview, media, and here we will create just an entity, I think, for the cam1 alt and cam1 image. Let's configure UI plus entities cam1 alt image. As you can see, both cameras show the same picture, and this is what I wanted to show you, that you can use one way or the other to define path for the camera image. So at this point we have done a couple of things. First thing is that we have configured motionEye to save picture where we want and to initiate trigger. We still have to test if this is working or not. And the second thing what we did is we created container with the Facebox software inside. Next thing what I want to do is I want to verify that I really am receiving notifications from the camera, and one way to do it is to configure notification on my Telegram. So let's go to configuration, automations, and here let's create a new notification. Let's call this camera motion webhook. This automation will allow us to at first see if everything is working up to this point, and that will help us in debugging if something is wrong. And second thing what this will do, it will allow us to finally run our image processing or face recognition inside Home Assistant. Trigger for this has to be webhook, and here we have to give the name, so it will be cam1 motion. And this webhook ID should match what we typed in earlier in motionEye. So let's check this. Yes, this is cam1 motion. And now we will just add here notification, so it will be my bearded bot message cam1 motion trigger. And we can save this. If everything is okay, we will receive a notification as soon as there is a motion inside our camera. So let's test this. So first we have to go to configuration, server controls, check configuration, because we did add automation. And now we can reload automations. And our automation should be up and running. So let's do it like this. Let's go to overview, media. Here we have this image. And if everything is correct, I will now move camera. Of course, this doesn't mean that there is movement on the image, but there is movement of the image. But it should nevertheless trigger our automation. Let's test. Okay, I've moved my image. And as you can see, I received cam1 motion trigger. And also this image moved. And if we click here, we can see that those two pictures match each other. They didn't need to match each other, they just need to match when the motion is active. There are only two things that we need to do now to finish the setup. First thing is we have to teach our Facebox images with the persons we want to detect. And second thing is, of course, to create some kind of notification or automation based on the face that is recognized. So I've prepared a couple of images. You will probably recognize those images when I open them. Let's go to Facebox. There are a couple of ways you can teach Facebox. You can do it even through Home Assistant. It requires that you post files somewhere where Home Assistant can read them, and then just load one after the other using the service call. Just be careful to always give the same ID or name for the person inside the picture for each picture the person is on. How I did it myself in my home setup, I have a balcony camera. This is an entrance camera, and I left my system running for a week, collecting various snapshots based on the motion. Then I removed every false positive, for example, if there was no person but the image was there. Then I divided pictures in person folder, so I give myself, my wife, and each of the kids its own folder, and I move all the pictures based on who is in the picture there. And I fed those pictures one by one to the system. And how you do it? You go to post the file, select try it now, give a name, Audrey Hepburn, and then you select each of the files you have prepared. Let's start with this picture. I will load all the pictures but one. I will not be loading this one, and this will be used to test if the face recognition is working or not. So let's start. One, post, success. Then we will select the other. Post. And you just keep repeating this until you get all the images inside the system. As you can see, sometimes you get no face detected. The system was unable to detect face on the image. You just select next one. It's always good to have as many faces as you can in the system. It makes the system more accurate. And at this point, I think we have 5 or 6 images inside the system. Let's test the system. This is just to show you how it works. So we will be using post the file. We will be using the file I didn't load inside the system. As I said, I left this one for the test. Let's open it and let's post. As you can see, it identified success was true, faces count was 1, and it identified the person in the image as Audrey Hepburn. This is really the exact same thing that our setup is doing. You have to give 5, 6, even maybe 10 images from your home setup, from your cameras, from your camera feeds to the Facebox. Connect each image of the person with the name. So make sure you only have that one person on the image inside the camera. If you would have 2 or 3 people, it would be harder for the system to identify who is who. So when you are teaching the system, just feed the image with the each individual person on the image to the system. And after 5, 6 images, the system will be trained good enough for us to use it in our home setup. You have to note a couple of things. First thing is, as you can see, we have a limited number of faces we can teach. And second thing is, each and every time the server restarts, you will lose everything you train the system unless you do following. There is managing state and there is downloading state. After you finish training your system, you have to save and keep somewhere in the safe place your state file. It's very simple. You just click download state file and it will be downloaded together with the timestamp and the extension .facebox. I did it once a year ago and I'm still using the same state for the Facebox. And every time I restart my Synology, and this is the only time my Facebox restarts too, I just go to the post the file, try it now, choose file, and use that state image I downloaded to reload in the system. You will get success true, meaning that this face pattern has been successfully loaded, and that's it. If you, as I said, please, if you teach your faces, if you spend a couple of hours, days, weeks to get all the images of the faces, then to teach the system who is who on what image, please save your state file, leave it in a safe place, because this is the only way you will not have to repeat what you did earlier. At this point, everything is in our Facebox system, and there is only one thing left for us to do to complete this setup. Let's go back to the Home Assistant. In order to finish this setup, what we have to do, we have to go to Configuration, Automations. Let's edit this webhook for camera we created previously. At the bottom, we will add action. We will call service image processing scan, and we will do this scan on our Facebook Cam1 image. Let's save this. Let's now go to Configurator. If you do not have your sensors file open, just go to Configuration folder, Sensors YAML, and open your Sensors YAML file. Inside sensors, we will create a template. So let's check if we have template platform created. No, it doesn't look like that. So let's create platform template. And this will be definition of template for sensors. And we will create new sensor called Facebox detection. Okay, next thing that we can do is we can give it friendly name. Let's call it Facebox detection. And here I will just paste values from my own setup. Paste it. Let's just align this correctly. And what I have to do here is just change this according to my setup. If I'm correct, this is Facebook Cam1 image. So we have template, sensors, Facebook detection. We want to check the state of image processing.facebook.cam1 image, and we want to pull this attribute 1 for the from the faces. Okay, let's save this. Let's go to configuration, server control, check configuration. And in order for us to complete the setup, we have to restart the system. And now we can start playing with the last automation. Let's create a new one. Audrey Hepburn. Recognized. For the state, we will be using state of the sensor Facebox. And we want to know when it changes to Audrey Hepburn. In a action call service, we will call notify once again, and we will add following message. OMG, Audrey Hepburn at the door. And let's save this. Configuration, server control, check configuration. And let's reload automations. Okay. So in order to test this, let me just fake. And now let's test this. Let me just open Telegram. And as you can see, Audrey Hepburn is at the front door. Okay. Maybe I should call Ghostbusters. How I did it is I just replaced temporarily. This picture will be of course overwritten as soon as I get any kind of motion on my camera, but I temporarily replaced that picture inside recordings from the Home Assistant with the image of Audrey Hepburn. And as you can see, we get this trigger. Unfortunately, this video is very long. It was also very hard to try to explain everything. I hope that you will be able to follow those steps. As always, if you have any kind of a comment or a question, you can leave it down in the comment section and I will do my best to reply to you and help you finish setting up this Facebox software. But this is it for today's video. Let me just do a brief recap so you don't forget any step. What you have to do is you have to create an account for the Facebox. You have to get the API key. You have to download the image for the Facebox and install it in your Docker container. After that, you have to tweak your motionEye so it can record images inside the Home Assistant folder. Next step was to create a camera that uses that image from the recordings folder based on the motion. And after that, we had to teach Facebox what faces we want to recognize and give those faces name. And the last part of the setup was to create sensor and automations. I will be definitely posting all the code that I used down in the description section. Hopefully during the Christmas season I will have a little bit of holidays and I will also be able to finally update my website and post all the steps there. And I hope I will be seeing you next time in 2 weeks in another Home Assistant running on Synology in Docker series. Thank you very much. I hope it was fun for you as it was fun for me. If you still haven't subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell button so you get notified. I would like to thank everybody who subscribed. And until the next time, bye bye, have fun, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.